I swear there must be a binary black hole in my house somewhere. It would account for all the missing socks. Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I like to talk about all the geeky pop culture that I like and consume, things like Doctor Who, Red Dwarf, and of course, Star Trek, which we are now on episode 2 of Discovery. And good news! Have you heard? Have you heard the good news? The good news is that in the UK and elsewhere, we can now watch Discovery completely legitimately because Paramount have heard us. Paramount have heard our cries of annoyance at it being struck off Netflix, and now they're putting it on a service I had never heard of before, Pluto, which is apparently owned by CBS, so same parent company, which makes sense. It's a free streaming service, and this season is going to be on there. So good on them for listening to fans and making sure that we can indeed watch Star Trek Discovery and not 6 months later than the US watches it. Thank you, Paramount. Thank you very much. That said, let's talk about this episode, Anomaly. Now, just a quick note. If you hear banging, scraping, weird noises coming from around me, that is because there is a man on my roof doing some repointing on our chimney. He's going to be here all day. I needed to record this in my lunch hour. There's not much I can do about it. And he doesn't stop for long enough for me to record this in between him being noisy. So you're probably going to hear him at some point. I just apologise for that. So if you watched my review of last week's episode, one thing I said was that there was only really one element of that first episode that hooked me enough to go, I want to know where they're going to take this. And that was how Book was going to deal with the destruction of his planet and the presumably loss of his family. And I was very happy, although it's a very sad storyline, I was pleased to see that they focused very much on that in this episode. So the one element of last episode which I really liked and thought had great dramatic potential and wasn't just repeating the beats that we'd had in previous seasons, which I'm really worried about with this season, is the one they focused on here. So I'm really glad of that. We get some nice moments of delving into sort of his PTSD of the of it, how he's dealing with it or not dealing with it, as the case may be. He's being very obsessive with trying to find out about what the anomaly is, understandably, but he's kind of shutting Burnham out, who just wants to help him and doesn't really know how. So it's obviously putting a strain on their relationship. He's become a little bit obsessive, and this episode really delves into his need for answers, and I really like that. And it starts with that scene with him and Burnham, and him having those flashbacks to his brother and nephew on the planet and the birds falling, which is a reoccurring motif throughout the episode. He has sort of visions or flashbacks to these birds. They appear in all these situations while he sort of zones out, and it's like sort of classic PTSD type behaviour. So I really like that focus on Book here, and I think it really works. The anomaly side of things, I'm still a bit meh about, because again, as I said last week, it kind of feels a bit repetitive of previous seasons. There's this strange thing out in space that's causing problems. You know, it's been, as I said last week, they had the red bursts, they had the burn, now they've got this. It feels like it's a little bit repetitive. There's this mystery box, which, I don't know, I'm just a little bit tired of this anomaly in space mystery box concept that they keep on returning to. I'd like them to do something different. So it's still not, the anomaly situation still isn't exciting me, but this episode I did really like. And even though I don't like the mystery box element of it, of finding out what the anomaly is, I like the character stuff that the situation they were in gave us in this episode, particularly with Book, but also other characters. Stamets particularly had some good stuff as well with Book. Tilly had some good stuff, and also just getting to see Burnham be a very competent... We had this last week as well, but Burnham be a very competent captain, the crew be a very competent crew, dealing with emergency situations in a very sort of they've got their own unique style. They quip while they're doing it, and I love that. But they're also incredibly competent, and when stuff happens, they adapt and they react really quickly. We also get Saru back in this episode. It's nice to see him. He has apparently turned down a captaincy of another vessel to request to be the number one on the Discovery. Now, I'm in two minds about this. I love Saru. He's one of my favourite characters on the show. So having him back on a weekly basis is definitely something, and interacting in a situation where he'll be interacting every week with the whole crew, it's definitely something I'm for. But I do also feel like it's a little bit of a, like, he was a captain and now he's a first officer. It feels a little bit harsh on him to be that. And then it was in the script, it's his choice. Like I say, he was offered a captaincy, and it does, I suppose, make sense that he would want to stay with his family, basically, you know, with the group that came with him from the 23rd century. They have a unique bond that he's not going to get on another Starfleet ship. So I do understand that from a character perspective. He also talks about, you know, needing their mentor, Jojo, having a sort of lesson about needing support, and he wants to be that support for Burnham. And I do get that, but I just kind of feel like maybe they could have done something and given him a different role where he would be regularly in it, but not as second officer. Maybe some kind of ambassador post where he was permanently posted to the Discovery, or was in Federation HQ, but we returned there a lot, and also perhaps, you know, he went on a few missions with them. Something like that kind of would have felt a bit more like treating his character a bit better. But I do understand that there are in-universe and character consistent reasons why he would do what he did. So, and it does mean we get him every week. So I'm okay with it. It's just one of those things. We get a briefing about the anomaly, and it was nice to see the Navarian president there as well, aka previously the Vulcan, planet Vulcan is now called Navarre, as we found out last season. So nice to see her. We also got a Ferengi pop up as well. That didn't really do anything, but it was nice to see the Ferengi there. Slight redesign. Their skin's a little bit gnarlier, but overall the same basic concept. Not too much of a redesign. It's not like they've done what they did with the Klingons in season 1, so it's fine. And they appear to be. He's a Starfleet. The Ferengi is a Starfleet officer, so perhaps Ferengi is a member world, or perhaps it's just a Ferengi that has joined Starfleet in the same way that Nog joined back in the day of Deep Space Nine. But either way, that's nice to see. And this is a briefing not just of the Federation members, because Navarre isn't a Federation member at this point, but of a whole host of worlds where this affects, not just the Federation. Which hopefully will be part of building up the trust between Federation and Navarre and other species that we will also see throughout this season and maybe into next season. I don't want them to rush this, as I said last week, but creating an ongoing plot arc where that might lead to a reforming of the Federation as we knew it before, or building back up to that. Maybe Navarre joining at some point. I'm sure that will be a plot line. At some point before Discovery ends, Navarre will probably rejoin the Federation, I suspect. But I would like that to be a long-term thing rather than a short-term thing. But it's nice that they're starting these building blocks. There's a crisis which affects everyone, so they all have to work together. That's much like the sort of Zindi incident, and then following that the Romulan War helped form the original Federation. This is going to bring those races together to hopefully one day build the Federation back up to what it once was. We get to see some stuff with Gray and Adira as well. Gray, the Doctor's talking through Gray about Gray's new body because they're looking to get a body. This is another plotline that I anticipated them taking a bit more time with. They seem to be almost at the, okay, Gray is a physical entity again, as opposed to being just sort of trapped in Adira's mind. So there were some nice references in this back to Picard, because apparently they're using the same technology that soon built for Picard's new body, his Golem body, as I think they call it in that show. Synthetic body for Grey, and Grey refers back to that using 800-year-old technology, but it just hasn't been improved on since. And also, a plot point that I think people had, or a question people had at the end of Picard season 1 was like, well, now this is possible. Why is everybody not, extend their life this way? And Culber drops in a line here which pretty much just covers that, which is that it's widely not successful, but he thinks it will be successful with Grey because Grey has had experience, or, we know that Grey's consciousness has been transferred between bodies, into Adira's, for instance, in the past. So he thinks it's likely it will succeed here, whereas in a lot of cases over the last 800 years it hasn't, which is why the technology isn't widespread, but it's possible. So a nice little callback to Picard there, tying these shows in together despite the fact that they are set in wildly different periods of the Star Trek timeline. Talking of Adira, there's a nice moment on the bridge once the ship has gone in to examine the anomaly, and things are going a bit chaotic. There's a nice moment there where they sort of are feeling a bit probably like unsure of their own abilities, and therefore when they're challenged by Tilly to Tilly double checks their calculations, they get a bit defensive about it, and Tilly kind of snaps back. No, I would do this with everyone. It's not a reflection of my opinions on your abilities. It's just important that we double check these things. So that was a nice moment for both Tilly and Adira, because from Adira's point of view, later on she's reassured by Tilly and she's given a kind of good work after the whole crisis is over. But it shows that they are still adapting. They're still unsure of how they fit into the crew. And then from Tilly's point of view, she is worried that she's actually told by Culber that she maybe was a little bit too harsh there, and that Adira is trying their best. So it's a moment for her to reflect on her own command style as a now freshly promoted lieutenant. She also has asked Culber at the end of the episode if she can see him for some sort of professional talk, so sort of counselling type thing. So I think going off of last week as well, she's going to have an ongoing plot arc where maybe she is also a little bit unsure of her own abilities in the role that she has been promoted into. So I'm interested to see where both of those sort of elements go. We get the first mention this season of Zora, the sphere data that has merged with Discovery's computer, and it's the first time we get to find out that she has the name Zora, which she had in the short treks, which is obviously set much in the future of Discovery's life at some point. And we're told she gave her, this is a conversation between Saru and Burnham. I was wondering, how much of the crew know about this advanced computer they now have. Obviously, we know Saru found out about it at the end of the last season. It makes sense that he would have briefed Burnham about it, and probably the higher-ups at Starfleet. But did the rest of the crew know? I don't know. It's interesting. But Burnham is referring to the computer. Instead of saying computer, she now says Zora End holographic program or whatever. So I'm hoping they keep developing that, and we get to find a bit more about the computer's personality as a potentially sentient entity as well. The action was on top form again when they go into the anomaly to try and read it, thinking that it's probably two black holes, but then it doesn't make the readings they get don't make sense that it's two black holes, so they still don't know what it is. Again, I'm unsure about this whole mystery box element. I'm a little bit tired of it for this. I wish they'd gone a different route this season, but it is what it is. We'll see how it goes. But the scene was very exciting. I will say one thing. Have they not learnt yet to put seatbelts in the bridge? Because they get thrown up into the air once. Understandable. You're not going to have your whole crew tied down to seatbelts the whole time. But after that, if the ship had seatbelts, which it should do, and we have seen Starfleet vessels with seatbelts in, I think it was the Kelvin movie timeline, so different timeline, but, we've seen it in Star Trek. You'd think they would activate them then, so that if they got hit again, which they do, they would not get thrown up into the air with the anti-gravity distortion again. But no, get your seatbelts sorted, guys. It's just common sense. And Book has flown his ship further into the anomaly with a holographic Stamets kind of communicating there as well. So they're both there. There's one thing about Stamets. We ended last season with him being very annoyed and looking very resentful that Burnham hadn't let him go to save his family and had ejected him from an airlock. And I was kind of expecting and also I kind of wanted to see that aminosity carry over into this season. But when she's briefing him, and I get that he has to be, I was kind of expecting him to be professional, but behind the scenes resenting it. But here, he's kind of joking about it. He makes a joke about getting pushed out of an airlock, and then he says too soon. So clearly on his part, he's kind of over that aminosity already, which I felt, I don't know, maybe they just didn't have time for it this season, but that kind of feels like it skipped over. I mean, I know there's probably been a time jump, but I would have liked to have seen their relationship heal rather than just come back in with it already healed. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. He does, however, have some animosity with Book, and their whole mission into the anomaly is quite tense. Book, he's worried, Stamets is worried about how to interact with Book having lost everyone, and Culber gives him some advice on that. But also we find out that Stamets has a little bit of, I don't want to say resentment, it's not resentment, it's Book reminds him that he couldn't save his family and Book had to save his family. So he says that every time he sees Book, that's why he hasn't really spoken to him in the last 5 months, because every time he sees him, it's a reminder that he couldn't save his family and Book had to do it. So there's this kind of like tension between them, and Book is like, at one point, you haven't spoken to me the last 5 months, why are you starting now? You're speaking to me more now in the last 5 months. And during that whole mission, exploring that dynamic was interesting. It seems to get resolved by the end of the episode in typical Star Trek fashion, and again, given the serialized nature of this show, I kind of would have expected that to maybe carry over a little bit more, but never mind. It's fine that it gets resolved here, like 10 seconds after it was introduced. But eventually, the mission is successful after a few hiccups. As I said, it's a very exciting scene. It shows the competence of the crew, it shows the competence of the captain. It also delves into more of, this whole scene delves into more of the PTSD from Book, so I liked that as well, because as I said, that's one of the most interesting threads at the moment in this season for me. He keeps seeing the birds, keeps zoning out. It's interesting, and I hope that this continues on as a thread in the next few episodes, and we don't just kind of go, okay, now he's over the PTSD aspect of it and he just wants like revenge or whatever. I want to see it develop more naturally than just, okay, we deal with this bit of it in one episode. So we'll see how it goes, but I liked what I saw in this episode. And we're left on a bit of a downer because they get the data from this anomaly and basically they analyse it and come to the conclusion that they can't predict a thing about it. They can't predict where it's going, where it's going to change course to, where it's going to hit next. Everywhere's just basically going to have no warning that this thing is going to arrive for them. And obviously that's a big problem. So I mean, what are they going to do now? Who knows? It's, as I said, as I keep saying, I'm not sure about this whole mystery box. We'll see where it goes. I'm always willing to keep an open mind, but it's not capturing me yet. I think just because we've had too many strange anomaly and space mystery boxes in this show. And I'd like something different, please. Let's just hope they tell some interesting character stories along the way. And I think they did that this episode, especially with Book, but with some of the auxiliary characters as well, like Tilly, like Stamets. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing where the character stuff goes in the rest of the season. Let me know what you thought of this episode. Did you enjoy it? I definitely enjoyed it more than the first episode. What are your thoughts? how are you feeling about the Anomaly storyline, and what do you want to see for in future episodes? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much. I will be back next week for another review. See you later.